was forced to reveal the identity of a mystery client whose name he tried to keep quiet, and that client is Fox News host Sean Hannity. So it would seem the president and Sean Hannity share more than dinners and frequent phone calls and a mutual love of Fox News programming. They also share an attorney. This did not come out willingly in court. Cohen's attorney said the client had asked not to have their name revealed. The judge said that wasn't a good enough reason to keep the name concealed, ordered Cohen's lawyers to reveal the name, and that name, as I said, was Sean Hannity. So Michael Cohen, that we know of, the president, the official Elliot Brody, who paid off the woman he had an affair with, which led to an abortion, and Sean Hannity of Fox News. Here's the way Sean Hannity explained it on his radio show after the news broke. Come
on, Hannity, tell us how it went down.
In court, Sean Hannity is Michael Cohen's client.
I've known Michael a long, long time. And let me be very clear to the media. Michael never represented me in any matter. I never retained him in the traditional sense as retaining a lawyer. I never received an invoice from Michael. I never paid legal fees to Michael. But I have occasionally had brief discussions with him about legal questions about which I wanted his input and perspective. And I assume that those conversations were attorney-client confidential.
So he seems to be saying, I was not really a client of attorney Michael Cohen's, but our conversations are confidential because he is an attorney and I am his client. Now, regardless of the exact nature of their attorney-client relationship, even if it is, as Hannity says on Twitter, almost exclusively about real estate, let's not forget that 1 week ago today, there was a raid on Michael Cohen's office, and Hannity reported on it on Fox News as if he had absolutely no connection to the story.
And this is a Fox News alert. President Trump's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen, just had his office, his home, and his hotel that he was staying in raided by the FBI today in an early morning raid. And what that means is Mueller's witch hunt investigation is now a runaway train that is clearly careening off the tracks.
So no disclosure, no disclaimer, not even a casual mention that, oh yeah, this guy also represents me in some form or fashion, mostly real estate, no mention of that, that he passes along free legal advice and private consultations. Sean Hannity also talks about it on his radio show.
This opens up an area where it seems that there's no limit at all into the fishing expedition that Mueller is now engaged in. And if he has access to everything that his personal attorney has, I can only imagine where that's going to lead.
He could definitely imagine at least one place where it might lead, to his own name. Sean Hannity is already starting to fuss and fume that the media is going crazy with this and insists that there's no there there. Perhaps there isn't, but not disclosing a business or legal relationship with someone you report on and have had as on your guests at least 16 times since since Donald Trump declared his candidacy, that doesn't sound either fair nor balanced. CNN crime and justice reporter Shimon Prokupecz was in the courtroom today. He joins us now. So talk about, first of all, the judge's ruling today.
So essentially, it was a small victory, I would say, perhaps, for Michael Cohen and his legal team. Their whole point in filing this motion was to be able to review the materials that the FBI seized a week ago, and they wanted to review it. They wanted to have an opportunity to discuss about what is privileged and what the government should not have access to. So today, the judge ordered prosecutors, the government here, to turn over, to make copies of various documents, some 10 boxes, it was revealed today in court, the FBI now has with material that they seized from Michael Cohen, electronic devices, and hard drives. And all of that now has to be copied and handed over to Michael Cohen's attorneys.
So is it clear, based on what happened in court today, whether or not Sean Hannity actually is Michael Cohen's client?
Well, much like everything else since Friday with this hearing, it's been a little confusing. Because since Friday, the judge has been saying to Michael Cohen and his attorneys, tell us who Michael Cohen represents. And there's always been this blurred line. And I think this goes to the argument that prosecutors have been making, that Michael Cohen has these interesting relationships with people that aren't necessarily people he's representing. There's just this vague sort of line here that prosecutors say does not always mean that these people are his clients. Sean Hannity, as you played earlier, denied that Michael Cohen represented him. But Michael Cohen's attorneys used the argument that Michael Cohen was his attorney and therefore should not release who this third client was that wound up being Sean Hannity. Certainly, Anderson, I can tell you, having been in this courtroom when that happened, it was a stunning moment. I mean, there was just the audience, people sitting around the courtroom. The reaction was quite audible, and many folks were certainly shocked after the judge ordered him to release the name of this client, Anderson.
So just what does the ruling mean in terms of the investigation moving forward? It certainly seems to be a delay, yes?
Yeah, absolutely, Anderson. This is definitely a delay. The prosecutors did not want this. They've been arguing since Friday that this was a stall tactic by Michael Cohen and his attorney, by the president's attorneys who have now intervened, who also want to view this material. So this prevents the investigators from looking at any of the information, any of the documents that were seized in the raid. It's now up to a taint team that is run by the government that has no access to the investigation to go over some of the materials that are going to be provided to Michael Cohen's attorneys. But in terms of the investigation, in terms of this material that was seized, the investigators will not have access for it until the judge decides what they should look at.
All right, Shimon Berkovitz, thanks. Lots to sort out. Joining me now, Gloria Borger and Milgram and David Axelrod, none of whom I have ever consulted with for private legal advice or free legal advice, nor real estate advice. So, Ann, we'll get to the Sean Hannity thing in a moment, but just the substance of the hearing. Who's happier tonight, the Michael Cohen, President Trump team, or Stormy Daniels?
I do think it's a mix, but I think I wouldn't classify it as a win for Michael Cohen and the president. I mean, their first ask was really, let us decide what's privileged and what isn't. Give us all the information back, let us go through it, and then we'll give to the government what we don't think is privileged. The judge said absolutely no to that. And so what the government wants is the ability for their taint team to review all the materials and then push out anything that is questionable to debate with the lawyers for Michael Cohen and the president. And what Michael Cohen's lawyer said is, okay, if you won't give it all to us, appoint a special master, which would be an independent third party that would go through all of it. Instead of the taint team. And the challenge for the government with that is that, and look, I think it's clear in a case like this that nothing that's attorney-client privilege is going to be reviewed by the investigators. The question is how they get there. And the government does do this regularly. The question is, will the judge defer to the government, as would normally be the case, or would she appoint a special master? The issue with the special master really becomes one of timing, that it tends to take longer and puts a little bit more delay. But I think that's what she's weighing now, and she hasn't decided that yet.
So she hasn't decided who the special master is?
She hasn't decided whether for certain she'll do a special master, but she asked to have 4 names given from each side. And that's an indication that she's seriously considering it. And so the lawyers have said that they'll provide those names to her tomorrow.
Who would normally be like a former judge or something?
A former judge, a former attorney general, former prosecutor, someone who might have been a U.S. attorney, but someone who would be a very well-respected lawyer.
Gloria, I mean, the longer the Cohen's team can run out the clock on this process, does it take some of the pressure off him to cooperate with the government, whether it's federal prosecutors or Manhattan or potentially a special counsel?
Well, it might, because it's significant for them to get judicial review, and that could obviously, if you've just been talking about, take longer. But I was speaking with a source today, a legal source who's close to this case, who said, look, the reason they got this search warrant in the first place leads you to believe that they're close to something. And so we don't know that what they are looking for was key evidence that they need in order to complete their case against Michael Cohen, or whether it's confirming evidence that they would just have liked. So if they were close and they wanted to just secure this evidence as additional evidence, then maybe they can go, they can do whatever they wanted to do with Michael Cohen in the first place without waiting for all of this, that they could continue to move. On the other hand, if they felt that they needed this evidence to indict, say, then it will take longer, and then it will help, Michael Cohen, because this is a process. And of course, they have the opportunity during this process to appeal.
And David, I mean, as for the Sean Hannity revelation, he says he wasn't Michael Cohen's client in the quote unquote traditional sense. Do you have any idea what that means?
No. First of all, my instinct when I heard this was that somewhere there's a scandal writer, TV writer, or House of Cards writer slapping their head and saying, why didn't I think of this? I mean, it is so unbelievable, this twist of the plot. But I don't know what it could be. And obviously the fact that they said he was a client and he was embarrassed to have his name released, I think, was telling. If I were Hannity, I'd be embarrassed as well, having gone off on the rampage he did about this Cohen business without revealing that he was involved. Now, Sean Hannity is not at the end of the day a journalist. He's not a reporter. He's an infotainer, and so perhaps he doesn't hold himself to those standards. But can you imagine how the folks on Fox would have howled Anderson if you, for example, had shown up as a client in a situation like this? So, I think it's a sticky wicket. And if he's not a client, why did his lawyers say he was? So it raises all kinds of questions.
Yeah, and I mean, if you haven't paid somebody and you've consulted them for advice, Sean Hannity claims about real estate primarily, although I don't know what that means exactly, what the other stuff would have been. Can you automatically say it's privilege?
Well, you can still be a client even if you haven't paid a lawyer yet. And sometimes you get advice and will pay later. Sometimes you don't pay. But the real question is, were you asking for legal advice and guidance? And then the second piece of this is always that, Sean Hannity had this conversation with Michael Cohen and somebody else was in the room, then it's not privileged. If they were talking about committing a crime, for example, or engaging in criminal behavior fraud, it's not privileged. So it really does come down to.
But if he's asking about some real estate deal,
sure,
if it's a business deal.
If it's a business deal and it's not legal advice, right? You could be on either side of that. And so I think, if it's for legal advice, look, how should I structure, how would you think about this legal arrangement? Then that could be attorney-client related.
Right. I mean, Hannity's, I guess, he's not a journalist. Certainly, he's essentially at this point a shadow spokesman for the president. I guess, though, I will say I'm even surprised that he would not, just to inform his viewers, in the some 16 times that Michael Cohen has been on, that we counted since Donald Trump announced a candidacy, that he would not at least say, you know what, I've consulted Michael Cohen for advice over the years on real estate stuff.
Right. You would expect that someone would do that and say, in the interest of full disclosure, I've gone to Michael Cohen for advice informally over the years about real estate. That didn't happen. You point out he's not really a journalist. And, my sources say to me, look, he didn't specifically, when he was having these conversations with Michael Cohen, he didn't specifically say, oh, this is covered under attorney-client because it was so informal that it wouldn't need to be said. But at this point, it's very clear when you look at the court proceedings that Hannity expects it and didn't want his name mentioned, even mentioned today. And I think there's a sense that Michael Cohen kind of threw Sean Hannity under the bus here.
Well, it also, David, it's interesting to me because, if Sean Hannity is one of his 3 clients in the last 10 years, that says a lot about what he's doing for President Trump. I mean, the second client was this, this RNC guy, this Republican donor, Elliot Brody, and with a hush payment to a former, Playmate, I think it was, or Playboy model, or Penthouse model. I get them confused. Playmate, I'm told. It does seem to then be really his client is Donald Trump.
Right. And I don't think that Michael Cohen has been spending late nights rifling through legal documents and journals and codicils. He is what he has been advertised to be. He is a fixer, and he has been Donald Trump's fixer for the last so many years. And I think what the government is arguing, and Ann would know better than I, is that he really is hardly a lawyer at all. That much of what he does has nothing to do with law in the traditional sense. He's out there and he's fixing stuff. Yeah. And so I think that's why they feel like the privilege doesn't apply to much of the material that they have gathered up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating day. Gloria Borger and Milgram, David Axelrod. Thanks. Up next, Hannity, Cohen, and the president, the love that dare not speak its name. The president pushes his TV program, the TV host pushes the president, and Michael Cohen seems to whisper in both their ears. Details on that. Plus, Stormy Daniels was in court today. You'll hear what she had to say, and I'll speak with her lawyer, Mike Labinati. Stick around.
Anderson Cooper 360, brought to you by Talks. Touch is how we communicate with those we love.
But does psoriasis ever get in the way? Embrace the chance of 100% clear skin with Taltz. For people with moderate to severe psoriasis, up to 90% had a significant improvement of their psoriasis plaques. With Taltz, 4 out of 10 even achieved completely clear skin. Don't use if you're allergic to Taltz. Before starting, you should be checked for tuberculosis. Taltz may increase risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Tell your doctor you have an infection, symptoms, or received a vaccine or plan to. Inflammatory bowel disease can happen with Taltz, including worsening of symptoms. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Ready for a chance at 100% clear skin? Ask your doctor about Taltz. Try it for as little as $5 a month.
Just worried about the house and taking care of the boys. Zach, talk to me.
It's for the house. I got a job.
It's okay. Dad took care of us. Principal, we can help you plan for that.
Feel the clarity of non-drowsy Claritin 24-hour relief when allergies occur. Day after day after day. Because life should have more wishes and less worries. Feel the clarity and live Claritin Clear.
Do you have the papers?
Watch The Untold True Story. You're talking about exposing government secrets. We could all go to prison off the greatest cover-up. If we don't publish, the country will lose the American history. The way they lied, those days have to be over. Get the Post on Blu-ray tomorrow.
These neighbors are starting right. Miracle Grow guarantees results with rich potting mix and essential plant food for 3 times the blooms. Success is sweet. Miracle Grow, 3 times the beauty, 1 powerful guarantee.
Reintroducing Arby's Greek beef and turkey gyro. The gyro? Mediterranean tacos, 2 for $6. Arby's, we have the meat.
A golf club that only hits it straight. That's some kind of magic wand? Not quite. Just the result of Dell EMC working with Callaway to gather data and design best-in-class clubs, transforming the player into a bona fide golfer. Maybe it is a magic wand. Magic can't make digital transformation happen. But we can. That's the power of Dell EMC, part of Dell Technologies.
Hold up. We got a laggy video call here. You need Verizon, the best network for streaming. Trade you. Okay, people, that's a reset. Let's take it back from surprise.
Get up to 50% off our best phones because Unlimited is only as good as the network it's on.
Is this what freedom looks like?
If you'd shown that girl 1 ounce of kindness, she would never have left.
I'd find every person involved, and they will be punished.
Probably is no out. The only out is within you.
So now that Michael Cohen's mysterious third client has been revealed to be Fox host Sean Hannity, the feedback loop continues to feed upon itself. This is a new one. We've known for a while that the president takes cues or gets some pointers from Fox News and vice versa, that he and Hannity are in frequent contact. Randy Cade tonight has more.
How good is Hannity, he said? How good is Hannity?
President Donald Trump in Phoenix last year, slamming the media as divisive, yet complimenting his pal Sean Hannity. The Fox News host and the president have a long and cozy history. As recently as last month, Trump hosted Hannity for dinner at his Mar-a-Lago resort. The 2 men discussed immigration, with Hannity pushing Trump on the border wall for the sake of the upcoming midterm elections. Hannity acted as an informal advisor during the campaign, but their relationship began long before Trump ran for president. Back in 2009, Trump was a regular guest on Hannity's show, talking about the Tea Party. The 2 men became fast friends, with Hannity backing Trump on his outlandish conspiracy theories, like Trump's false notion that President Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States.
Look, he's got a grandmother in Kenya who said he was born in Kenya at the hospital.
This issue could go away in a minute.
Just show I don't understand.
The Trump-Hannity connection is unique. The 2 reportedly still talk regularly. As frequent Fox News guest Newt Gingrich put it, it's the New York thing, They talk the same language. Over the years, Hannity has become one of the most dependable pro-Trump voices on TV, openly advising the president on issues like Russia.
If I was advising the president, I'd say, let this investigation go forward.
Hannity hitched himself to the future president early on. At the 2015 CPAC gathering, Hannity wore a Trump brand necktie to interview Trump. MSNBC's Joe Scarborough has reportedly called Hannity Trump's lapdog, but that hasn't stopped Hannity from defending the president.
So the never-Trumpers, like Senator Flake, they don't seem to understand that by blocking the president's agenda, and you see the reaction he gets around the country, they're only harming you, the American people.
Listen to Hannity in the hours after Donald Trump's former campaign manager was indicted.
This indictment has nothing, let me repeat, nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion. Zip, zero, nada.
And like the president, Hannity dismisses the Russia investigation as a witch hunt. The two men are so close that even after Trump bragged about grabbing women's genitals on the Access Hollywood tape, Hannity stood by him.
Ken David had 500 concubines for crying out loud.
Hannity even backed the president on his false claims that his inaugural crowd was the largest ever. Trump, for his part, often promotes Hannity's program, like this recent tweet, "Big show tonight on Sean Hannity." It's a bromance where it seems both men benefit. Randy Kay, CNN, Palm Beach, Florida.
With me now, criminal defense attorney, Professor Alan Dershowitz, author of the book, Trumped Up, How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy, and former Obama White House ethics czar, Norm Eisen. Professor Dershowitz, welcome back. You were on Hannity's program the day of the Cohen raid. You said it's a very dangerous day for lawyer-client relations. What do you make of the fact that you were actually saying that to somebody who, according to Michael Cohen, was a client, although according to Sean Hannity, not a client?
Well, he was in a very difficult situation. He's not going to not talk about the Cohen raid, obviously, and he didn't want it to be known that he was a client. Look, I think he had to make a choice, and I think the choice should have been to disclose to the viewers that he has a relationship. He could have described the relationship in any way he wanted, but the viewers have a right to know there's a relationship.
Just in terms of, do you believe he is a client? If somebody is just getting free legal advice from somebody who he has on a show a lot, what is that?
Well, every week somebody comes over to me when I'm leaving here or somewhere else and says, "I just want to ask you one quick legal question," and I'm very tough. No, you have to establish a lawyer-client relationship. Otherwise, whatever you tell me is public knowledge. So, I taught legal ethics for 40 years. Norm Eisen was the legal ethicist. We understand that. A lawyer like Cohen, somebody like Hannity, wouldn't really understand that. People sometimes hand me $1 and they say, "Here's $1. I've just retained you. You're my lawyer." No, I get the $1 back.
You accepted a $1 retainer. You're pretty much a lawyer. And you are. Ambassador Eisen, Sean Hannity says Cohen never did any legal work involving a third party, never retained him or received an invoice. This was mostly about real estate. How does it smell to you?
Well, it does smell a little off, Anderson. I have to agree with Alan. There are ethics rules, just like we as lawyers have ethics rules. And it's universal among journalists. The radio, television, and digital journalist news organization, the International Federation of Journalists, all of them have a code. You have to, if you can't have conflicts, if you do, you have to disclose. So I don't think it's right. And there's other strange things, Anderson, because Hannity threw Cohen under the bus when he said, "I never retained him." He, words to the effect, Cohen didn't represent him. He never gave him money. Then Hannity switched and he did just what Alan talked about. But it sounded a little too schooled. On his show, he said, "Well, maybe I gave him $10 and said I want to be protected by the attorney-client privilege." Come on. Clients don't talk like that. So I think the whole thing reeks.
But it doesn't work that way. Can a person believe if they're talking to a friend who's an attorney and getting just some advice, and we don't know if it's actually a legal deal or a real estate deal that is not talking about can they expect there to be attorney-client? How do you know if there's going to be attorney-client?
Well, anybody ought to ask. You ought to be very clear about it. But people do have expectations. People do think that if they talk to me at a cocktail party where there are other people around and ask me for legal advice, they subjectively believe that somehow they've established a lawyer-client relationship with me, but they haven't.
So you really have to ask somebody, you say, is this a privilege?
And the lawyer should take the initiative and say, this is not a lawyer-client conversation. Do not count on me protecting you if I'm subpoenaed or even asked by the press whether we've had a conversation. So it's very important. Now, the one area where I think the judge may have created a problem is when she categorically ruled today that the name of a client is never covered by lawyer-client privilege, if that's what she said. I haven't read her opinion. There are exceptions. There are some cases where the name is regarded as lawyer-client classified. If going to the lawyer itself requires confidentiality, for example, this is a good close example, if there's a lawyer who's only a fixer and only fixes cases involving guys who've had affairs with women, you don't want to be known as that guy's client, because if you are, you know why you went to him. And in cases like that, the courts have protected the names of clients when they sought to be disclosed.
That's right. Thanks very much. Ambassador Norm Eisen, thanks as well. Still had Stormy Daniels, had strong words for the president's lawyer, Michael Cohen, what she said outside the courtroom. We'll also talk to her attorney, Michael Avenatti, when we come back.
Get him, Michael Avenatti.
Records allowing Cohen's legal team to
come on, Michael Avenatti,
be protected under attorney-client privilege. Also, Fox News host Sean Hannity was outed as one of Cohen's.
Hannity!
Mr. Hannity is pushing back on that. And adult film star Stormy Daniels was also in the courtroom today. Some of the documents seized from Cohen last week were related to the $130,000 payment he made to Daniels right before the election to keep her quiet about an alleged affair with the president. Stormy Daniels spoke to reporters as she left the courthouse.
So for years, Mr. Cohen has acted like he is above the law. He has considered himself and openly referred to himself as Mr. Trump's fixer. He's played by a different set of rules, or should we say no rules at all. He has never thought that the little man, or especially women, and even more women like me, mattered. That ends now. My attorney and I are committed to making sure that everyone finds out the truth and the facts of what happened, and I give my word that we will not rest until that happens.
Well, also in the courtroom today was Ms. Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, who joins us now. I'll get to the Sean Hannity thing in a moment. Just the ruling by the judge today, do you see it as a partial win for Michael Cohen? Because since they at least get to name a potential master to look over the documents that have been taken.
Well, I mean, I'd call it more like kissing your sister. I don't know that it's a win. I mean, it's certainly not a loss. But what they really wanted to do, Anderson, was they wanted to get control of the documents back and get them back from the government so they could make the determinations relating to privilege with the president, the Trump organization.
That would have been a very big win. Obviously, they were the ones determining what was published and what was not.
Correct. And one of the reasons that we were there was to make sure that did not happen, because we believe the integrity of the documents, making sure documents don't magically disappear, is of the utmost importance for our case out in California. So we wanted to avoid any spoliation, what they call spoliation in the law, or anything of that nature. And so we were happy that the judge seems very focused on ensuring that that does not happen.
You said, I think it was yesterday, that you believe within the next 90 days there may be an unsealing of an indictment against Cohen for what you said were a host of very serious offenses. If we don't know that that's true, I'm not sure what you're basing that on, but what happened today, did that slow down your belief in that timetable?
No, not at all. I stand behind that. It's my belief based on some pretty good information that I have. And look, I think my track record's been pretty good over the last 6 weeks. I think that's going to happen in the next 90 days. And I think it's going to be a significant domino to fall. And there's going to be serious, serious consequences from there on out.
What was it like in the courtroom when the revelation was made about Sean Hannity?
Well, Anderson, you need to understand there was a huge buildup. There was about 20 minutes of buildup to that moment.
Where the Cohen attorneys were resisting this.
Correct. Michael Cohen's attorneys were resisting disclosing who the third client was. There was considerable debate back and forth with the judge, with the assistant U.S. attorney, with others in the courtroom, back and forth as to whether it was going to be disclosed. In fact, at one point, Michael Cohen's attorney told the judge that they had been instructed by this client, at that time we didn't know who it was, that if she ordered the name disclosed, they were to take an immediate appeal of the judge's ruling.
They claimed the client had said that, meaning Sean Hannity had said that.
Correct. And it was basically a warning shot to Judge Wood. And, Judge Wood's been around a long time. She's an exceptional judge. She's not going to be intimidated by stuff like that. But they were trying to send the message. It went nowhere with her. And then ultimately, the judge said, I want you to publicly disclose it. And the attorney for Michael Cohen said, well, do you want me to state it orally, or put it on a piece of paper? And I thought for sure he was going to put it on a piece of paper and hand it up to the judge. It's kind of a Hail Mary with the idea that maybe the judge looks at it and says, well, I want to think about this. But lo and behold, he said the client's name is Sean Hannity. And it was like, Anderson, a bomb went off in this federal courtroom. I mean, there were gasps. There was, 8 or 10 journalists that all of a sudden abruptly stood up.
People gasping?
No, I was surprised, but quite honestly, and it's been reported. I mean, my reaction was, well, at least now we know why Fox News hasn't been covering our case for 6 weeks.
It is surprising that Sean Hannity has not, and all the times he's interviewed Michael Cohen, ever said, "Oh, just full disclosure, we have a long relationship. I asked him for advice sometimes."
Well, again, I'm not a journalist. I mean, I don't know the standards by which you and other exceptional journalists live by. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, are going to analyze this and what needed to be disclosed or not. What I will say is this. I think Michael Cohen's, I think Sean Hannity should have had his own counsel in the courtroom. I think that Michael Cohen's counsel, somewhat threw him under the bus in the hearing. I mean, that's my takeaway from it. I think it should have been handled differently than it was.
You filed an objection to the president and Michael Cohen's request for a stay in the Daniels lawsuit to the criminal investigation in New York. Do you have a sense of when that stay will be ruled on?
So their reply is due on Tuesday evening, and Judge Otero, who's incredibly thorough, and he is on top of things like you cannot believe. I would imagine that he's probably going to issue a ruling on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, and we're very confident in our position.
So your case moves irregardless of what happens in New York.
It's getting hot. I mean, they're on parallel tracks right now, and if we're successful in defeating the motion to stay, then next up is our motion relating to the deposition of Michael Cohen and the president.
Wow. Michael Avenatti, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Coming up, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said new sanctions against Russia were coming. The president reportedly said not so fast. We'll ask the Deputy White House Press Secretary Hogan.
Why would I be asleep?
The war wars between the president and his former FBI Director, Jim Comey. That's next.
Trusted name in news.
There was an announcement we expected from the Trump administration today that did not come, tied to Syria and Russia. Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, mentioned it yesterday. Take a look at what she said.
So you will see that Russian sanctions will be coming down. Secretary Mnuchin will be announcing those on Monday if he hasn't already. And they will go directly to any sort of companies that were dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons use. And so I think everyone is going to feel it at this point. I think everyone knows that we sent a strong message, and our hope is that they listen to it.
Well, that did not happen today. I want to find out why. Joining us now is Deputy White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. Hogan, thanks for being with us. When Nikki Haley said that yesterday, that Russian sanctions were going to be announced today, did she misspeak? Was she misinformed? Did the announcement get canceled after she spoke? And is the White House concerned at all that may reinforce the narrative that things are chaotic?
No, look, I mean, UN Ambassador Haley has done an incredible job for this administration, one of the strongest voices for the American ideals across the globe. But the administration is looking at sanctions on Russia, potentially some more sanctions, quite frankly, but we don't have any announcement to make at this time.
So how did she, I mean, because, everybody, as you said, she's very practiced and very careful in what she says, and often has private conversations with the president before she appears on television. From all the reporting that I've read, did she just misspeak, or was she misinformed, or did the president change his mind?
Look, I obviously can't speak for Nikki Haley. She was my governor. I've known her for a long time, both being from South Carolina. But what I can tell you is there is a chance that we do issue more sanctions. We just don't have a decision yet from the administration.
The Washington Post, as you probably know, is reporting that the president himself halted them because he was not comfortable executing them at this point. And if that's true, do you know why the president isn't comfortable executing sanctions against Russia right now?
Look, I'm not going to get into internal deliberations as to what the president will do or won't do as it relates to potential sanctions forthcoming on Russia. What I can tell you, though, is no one's been tougher on Russia than this president. As you know,
well, it sounds like Nikki Haley's actually tougher than this president.
No, that's not true at all. Look, the president is the only one who can make those decisions, and he's the one who puts forth the sanctions. Barack Obama wouldn't give lethal aid to the Ukraine. He wouldn't open up oil exports to Eastern Europe. President Donald Trump did both of those things. We've closed down 3 diplomatic facilities in the country. In San Francisco, New York, and Washington, D.C., we expelled hundreds of Russians back to their country. I mean, this president has taken a tough stand on Vladimir Putin. It continues to this day, up to and including the fact we just struck Syria, one of Russia's allies, and we're considering more. We just don't have any more announcements to make on those potential sanctions today.
The president did address the nation on Friday, promising to respond to the Syrians' use of chemical weapons with, quote, all instruments of our national power, military, economic, and diplomatic. How is he responding economically if with no new sanctions?
Well, look, I mean, what the president did was come up with a leadership plan, quite frankly, that brought together our partners and allies in the region. He put together a surgical strategic strike to try and stop Syria in their use of chemical weapons on its own people. We all saw the videos. We all saw the pictures. It was gruesome. It was horrific. Russia also complicit in that for telling us for years that they were working to stop that chemical weapons program and didn't do it. This president stood up and said, we're not going to have that happen anymore. We're going to focus on joining with our partners and allies to ensure that those chemical weapons, that infrastructure was shut down, and we hit a surgical attack on those, and it stopped.
That was military, and I get diplomatic because he did it in conjunction with the UK and France, but just economic, we haven't really seen anything.
But it's economic too. If Syria can't rebuild, they don't have the money to do anything. When you do systematic destruction like we did with our partners.
So economic wasn't a reference to new sanctions.
There are new potential sanctions out there, Anderson. I'm not going to get ahead or get into hypotheticals what the president may or may not do. We don't telegraph what we do in this White House as opposed to previous administrations.
Well, actually, the president did telegraph of using smart weapons to bomb Syria. But anyway, what I want to ask you about James Comey. When Comey initially cleared Hillary Clinton the email investigation, President Trump criticized him, saying it was a rigged system. Then when Comey announced the reopening of the case in October, the president said that it took.
I'll see y'all. What's up?
And then he brought back his reputation. Now the president.
I'm listening like y'all listening.
A liar. It does appear as if the president's opinion of Comey is really only based on whether or not Comey's actions are favorable or unfavorable to the president. What would you say to that?
Not true. The president ultimately fired James Comey. Look, James Comey is a disgruntled, discredited, disgraced individual who was fired from the FBI by President Donald Trump. And he was fired because he leaked information, some of which may or may not be classified, according to senators like Chuck Grassley, and then he lied about it. And as the chief, the head of the highest law enforcement division in all the land, you cannot use politics, poll numbers, and personal bias to make decisions, and that's exactly what James Comey did. And every time he opens his mouth, and you know this, Anderson, he was the most hated person in this town until President Donald Trump fired him. Now he's the toast of the town. He leads every newscast, every podcast, every broadcast.
I'm confused because when he was fired, I interviewed Kellyanne Conway that night. You all sent out a lot of people on television, and you were all saying the reason he was fired was the way he treated Hillary Clinton. Then the next day, the president said to Lester Holt, it was actually Russia. And now you're saying he was fired for leaking information?
I'm saying it's all of those things. Go back and look at what we now know.
That's the first time I heard that he was fired for leaking information.
Look, right. You see this book tour now, and you see all the things that are starting to come out that James Comey himself admitted to doing. So this is what the problem is. And when this town, as you know,
it just sounds like your
stories
are shifting though. Like it was being mean to Hillary Clinton, which always seemed unusual, and the next
they're not mutually. It's not mutually. But it's not mutually exclusive, Anderson. All these things work together to show exactly why James Comey is a disgraced individual. Okay. It takes a lot to unite Republicans and Democrats in this town with the rancor and rhetoric that exists. As you know, the polarization is incredible, like the likes of which I've never seen before. But congratulations to James Comey, because you united everybody around your ridiculous book tour.
All right. The New York Times reported recently that the president's advisors are more concerned with the investigation to Michael Cohen than they are about Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. Is the president himself also more concerned about the Cohen investigation at this point or the Mueller investigation?
Look, I can tell you that the president is a little bit frustrated and concerned about the direction that the Mueller investigation has taken. But we've been fully cooperative with Special Counsel Mueller. And as you know, we've turned over thousands and thousands of pages of documents. We've given several people over for testimony. I mean, we've cooperated fully.
But to the question, though, it did seem like the president, when he was meeting with his military team, talking just prior to the strike on Syria, he clearly was very upset about the Cohen raid.
That is like 83,
because he
more like 73
in the Mueller investigation.
You slime ball.
Look, I haven't spoken with him directly about the Cohen raid. What I can tell you is the
You're
president's
slime.
concerned about the direction that the Mueller investigation is turned. But as far as Michael Cohen's concerned, I'm going to have to refer you to him or his personal attorney for any comment. Any comment there?
You know, the other day, Sir Sanders was asked if Michael Cohen is still in the president's confidence. Is he still an employee? I mean, is he still a personal attorney of the president? Do you know the answer to that? Because Sarah Sanders, it wasn't really clear.
No, she answered it today actually on Air Force One, and she said what we all know, which is absolutely the president has a relationship with him. I don't know the exact relationship as it relates to a professional agreement they may or may not have, but you also know that the president has many attorneys. This isn't his only one. So they still do have a relationship.
But you're not sure he's still an attorney.
To the extent of that, I can't tell you how extensive it is.
All right, Hogan Gidley, I appreciate you being on.
Thanks so much for the time.
Up next, what supporters of President Trump have to say about the Comey interview. Our Gary Tucker in Washington with a group of Republicans in South Carolina. We'll get their reaction.